Hey, I'm guessing you're here because you want to create an entire graphic novel in a single day, which I know sounds a little unbelievable and absurd, but it's actually possible. And I've done it a couple times now, and I want to share with you guys how it's done. So I had posted my last book to the Midjourney Discord, and I got a lot of people saying, well, how do you do this? What's the process like? So I'm putting together my very first sort of how-to video related to this. There's really 4 pieces of software that are required or that I use to get this done. The first one is obviously Midjourney, right? I think DALL-E 2 could probably work, but I've had much better luck in Midjourney. The second is Inferkit. Now this is completely optional. I get a kick out of having AI write the scripts or the stories for me as opposed to me doing it. I think you could very easily write your own story and still get the graphic novel done in a day. It depends on how quickly you write. Having the story done via AI just kind of simplifies the process, and the output tends to be bleaker and funnier and sadder, and it just matches with the tone of what I want to do. And then, and probably the most important piece outside of Midjourney is a piece of software called Comic Life. I use it on my iPad. I think it was $5. It saved me hours and hours of time compared to trying to do layouts in Photoshop, or if you're trying to find a free software, GIMP. I don't know how it compares to what is it, Alpha Paint or Alpha something. I used to use some of the other softwares. Once they go to subscription, though, I tend to leave because I don't like the idea of having to pay a subscription fee, especially if I have output that isn't consistent, right? Where I've got a month or two where I'm creating, and then, you know, my ADHD gets me focused on something else, and so I hyper focus on something unrelated to it, and don't remember to cancel out the subscription, and maybe won't go back to it for 6 months or a year or so. And in the same vein, I also use the Affinity sort of suite of software because they're a flat fee, and I can use them indefinitely. I do think they do a sale a couple times a year where they're like 40% off. So if you're looking to find a cheap replacement for Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, I think they're great. I don't think they do everything that those software can do, but for the low-end professional, for sure for the hobbyist, and even for the professional to some extent, I think you can get what you need out of that suite of software and not have to pay Adobe subscription fees. So those are the 4 things. I'm going to kind of show you the process, and in real time, got to the current book I have called Barffield the Dog, under my pen name Wazel Bulverton. So check this out. All right, so we're going to start out in Midjourney. Basil Wolverton is the art style prompt that I use in this book. Whoever you want to use, or if you don't want to use an art prompt, I think the nice part about using an art prompt is it does allow you to have some consistency with how the content comes out. I think making sure you're aware of what size aspect ratio, that's that --AR you're using for the panels, right? Horizontal, tall. In order to use Midjourney, I think the easiest thing to remember, or one of the most important things to remember, is that once you find those sizes you like, make sure that you up-res them. You don't need to up-res them to max if you are going to be using multiple panels per page. If you're going to only have a single panel on a page, I do recommend up-resing to max. You can see the up-res here in that, when you find an image you like, you got this quadrant to start out with. All you got to do is click on the U up-res, and the other one is obviously versioning. That up-res version, that is a high enough resolution to print for sure. Once you've got all your images together, you got to go and create a script. And so what I've done here is provided a link for Inferkit, and you just set a length, roughly 500 characters, let's say, is a good place to start, and drop in your keywords. So in this one, it's like dogs and animals and behavior and exercise, and then I ran this a couple times with dogs and depression and dogs and sadness, and I just copy and paste everything that the generated text gives me, right, into a Word doc. Once that Word doc is totally full of content, and I try to go way overboard, then what I'll do is I will open a new blank document, and I will put a bunch of space at the top of that blank document, and I'll just read through and start cutting and pasting the lines that I like from the AI. So, the narrative you've got to build in your head, and I think you can't rely on the AI to give you a complete narrative, but go through, copy and paste the lines, find that story that, from all that generated text that you've created. Once you have that story together, and it could be, 20 pages, it could be, 100 pages, I think it's up to you. Go through that Word doc, and then with a hard return between each line, roughly break out page 1, page 2, page 3, all the way through all the pages. You'll be glad you did this when you bring this into comic life. When the pages are broken up, you'll see it makes it much easier in sort of separating out the pacing that you need to make the comic work. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open Comics Life now on the iPad. Like I said before, this is a relatively inexpensive app. I think I paid $5 for it. Open up a new script and copy or paste the script that you had copied previously. You can see where all those page numbers have come in handy now to separate them out by page. Also open a blank comics page. I'm going to go through and add the capital CAP and a hard return before that to each one of these, and what that does is it tells the program, you'll see, we'll eventually be able to drag these narrator sort of boxes or caption boxes into the comic directly, which will save some time. Now, I want to change the page size. It's 8.5 by 11 now. I want something that's going to print out and work really well. So the comic book page size, I think, is 7.5 by 10, which is also the same as a 6 by 9. That ratio is important if you're going to put it to Kindle or you're going to put it to Blurb. And then here are the panel layouts. And so, pick the one that feels appropriate to your book. You can change them pretty easily. You'll see me dragging these panel pieces across and extending them out to kind of fit that first page. So, I think I originally think about having one big splash page to start. You'll see later on I go back and revise that, but you can set these pages and change them to whatever size they need to be. You also need to then go through, once you start dragging those captions into your frame, to set like the line weights and stuff. And so you have the ability to do that under that paintbrush tool. And so you'll see me go through and change the width and the line style, the stroke style of these panels. A important thing to note is once you get sort of a set that you like, to apply that to all of them, you just need to go back to that top menu where the paintbrush is, and you'll see a little pencil. Make sure once you're there that you click on that pencil, and you'll see me pop in here so you can see what it is. We've got to zoom into that and click on this pencil here, and it'll apply those changes both for font, for line weights, to all those things across the entire comic. And so to get that right at the beginning is important so that all your pages end up looking the same. Now, I don't like the standard comic font. I use Tomb, which comes from Retro Supply Company. I think it's like $20 for the font. Well worth it to me. It's like an EC Comic style font. You can use whatever font you'd want to use here. Try to find a font that fits your style, and obviously don't steal fonts if you can avoid it. I think people should get paid for the work they do, which I understand the irony of saying that while I'm using Midjourney to make a comic in the same day. So I like to center these boxes. Some people will right align them, but I will center them, and then I'll resize all of them. Once again, I'm back to pointing to that pencil tool, set the template to lock so that all of them are the same. And then go through and just start dragging your boxes or your word balloons or whatever it is that you've put together into your app. Now, if I click on that picture tool in the middle of the frame, it allows me to pick a picture from the gallery to start filling in. I think at the beginning of this video, I can't find the right photo, so I move on to the next page. So you'll see to add a page in the book, it's pretty simple. Or actually, I resize this is what I do first. I go back and I say, you know what, this should really be 2 panels. I find a picture for the first panel of the sad dog, and I can't find a picture for the second panel yet. I go back later and add it. And that's the nice part about using this app, but I'm going to add another page. So click on the page tool, click on the layout you like. I stuck with basic because it keeps the alleys of the pages all roughly the same size, which I think is helpful. You got to be aware of that. And now you can sort of watch in fast motion me dragging the captions, and I'm literally just holding that ABC and dragging it across into the frame, clicking on the picture and adding a picture. In some of these cases I'm resizing and adding frames, but it's really as simple as copy paste, and it snaps to the alley distance, so it's pretty easy to make changes and have the layout stay consistent. I don't know if there's much to add here other than this is I guess the creative part of making a comic that you don't draw yourself, is that trying to determine whether or not you've gotten the right renders from Midjourney, whether or not you've gotten the right captions. I think going back, and something that's important for polishing a comic is to highlight certain words, right? Is to hit the emphasis on them. You can do that in the script side of things by either italicizing or bolding, whatever it is. And here I'm going back and adding more captions. And now you can see the italics being added. When I drag those over, those words will be emphasized on the page. And so I won't have to go back and redo that. I think you can get most of that right the first time. I think, like any other creative art form, you're going to put it all together, and then you're going to want to walk away from it for an hour or a day, whatever it is, and reread it. If you're trying to get this done in a day, I do recommend trying to get the book and then going back and rereading it a few times, because I think the pacing is not always easy to get right, especially if you're using Midjourney art where you don't get exactly the angle or exactly the thing that you want. Some of it gets a little surreal. And here I am going back in a little bit later and replacing assets to say, hey, I thought this picture worked as I read through the book. It doesn't work anymore. And just trying to polish, right? And there's multiple versions. It's going back into Midjourney and saying, hey, here's the same prompt, or here's the image that kind of works. Let's do iterations and versions of it. I think it's the beauty of Midjourney. It doesn't take you that long to come up with, an additional dozen or 24 images to go back once you kind of have a decent start or a decent place that you like. I have some sort of strict rules that I don't do any image manipulation as far as Photoshop. I do flip some of the pictures if it makes more sense to have them facing a different direction. Same with the copy for the book. I don't actually change any of the words. Obviously, I will go through and pick the sentences I want and put them in an order that I want, but I like the idea that whether they're typos or grammatical errors or they're just weird ways to phrase, that's what the AI came back with, so that's what I've kept. So once you've got that sort of all the pictures and all the photos put together and your book getting close to finish, then you're going to want to create a cover and go back and get the book prepped for either printing, digital, or actual physical printing, which is what we'll take a look at next. I could probably be doing some weird ASMR breathing here, but I'm not very good at that, so I'm just going to quietly let the music play in the background as I wait for this sort of real-time section. This is the final page I'm working on here. All right, cool. So now I'm jumping into Affinity Designer. I've got a cover that I need to make. This is a asset that I rendered once again in Midjourney. I made sure to res that up to the maximum size. I had a set font for the Weasel Wolverton that I used on my first book. I literally just copied that. I copied that image and that sizing from the first book. This is a whole separate video on how to do type and how to do graphic design layout. I am not great at it. You can see me struggling here. I don't love this cover. I think it works for what it needs to do, but it's not perfect. Once again, it's a book that you're making in a day, so I think what you need to do is think about that on your own. Also, pay attention to what you're exporting these at. So the reason I'm popping in here is, we've got that 6:9 aspect ratio. That's important, and I'm making sure that I'm exporting this file at 300 dpi, so that when I do print it, it is at a high res. Sometimes digital files will default to 72 dpi. You don't want to export stuff. Here I'm importing the PDF that we exported out of Comics Life into Affinity Designer. The one thing that I found that I like to manually go back and do is just adjust where the pages sit within or the panels sit within the page. Affinity Designer tends to, especially if you're using the basic layout, tends to be sort of top heavy weighted, where most of the page, there's more space at the bottom than the top of the page. And I think margins are important. If you don't know what margins are, what the margins are going to be for your book, pay attention. I think the Kindle digital doesn't, your margins, there isn't like a bleed, but if you're going to go to, you know, Blurb or somewhere else to print, there's definitely going to be a bleed margin you have to be aware of, and that may mean going back on every single page and having it shrunk down by, you know, 3 or 5%, or manually changing things. If you think about that ahead of time, though, you'll have a much easier time once you're finishing your book, so that, you know, things are the way they're supposed to look. These are the small details that really do matter, though, because if you go to print the book and suddenly part of your page is actually chopped off or whatever it is, that's not going to look great. So here I am pasting that cover image that I had created on the front of the book and exporting it. So I'm going to export this as a digital PDF, which I think I bring the DPI down to 150 or so, and I flatten it for file size reasons. But if you were going to print this, you'd want to leave it for print at 300 DPI, and that book is likely going to be hundreds of megs, right? It's going to be quite large, but that's what's expected for a book. But there you have it. Congratulations, you now know how to make a graphic novel in a single day. With great power comes great responsibility, I'm sure. A couple unsolicited thoughts on this. I don't think we're in a place where artists and writers need to be worried about losing their jobs. I don't think this is going to take over all art generation, at least not for the next couple years. I do think, though, in the future, AI is going to play a much, much larger role, and we are just at the very beginning of something that I think is very cool. So hopefully you're into it and you embrace it and find ways to take advantage of it versus fight, because I don't think it's going away. So just want to show you, here's a copy of the book, the first book that I did in Midjourney. I printed it Blurb 6x9 on like the fancy paper stock. I think it was like 10 or 12 bucks or something to print. It was relatively inexpensive. Turned out great. I think what you got out of Midjourney for this size book was awesome. And so I'd recommend anybody else who is looking to create a graphic novel to use Blurb for printing. But I don't get any money from them, so if you don't want to use them, don't do it either. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Bye.